So it is my great pleasure to introduce Frank Esposito. Frank Esposito joined Omnova in February 2015 as the company's assistant general counsel. He's been promoted to positions of increasing responsibility during his tenure, including corporate secretary in June 2015, investor relations in 2018, and vice president in 2019. Frank is an accomplished legal professional with significant corporate governance, mergers and acquisitions, capital markets, executive compensation, labor and employment, and securities law experience. With expert in managing through substantial corporate change, corporate communication and disclosure, and leveraging technology and software solutions to streamline legal processes. Frank joined Omnova from KeyBank, which is also located in Cleveland, Ohio, where he was counsel, mergers and acquisitions and securities from January 2013 and led the legal team for KeyBank's first significant acquisition in 20 years. Prior to KeyBank, Frank served in the administration of Governor John Kasich of Ohio as a control bid attorney in the Department of Commerce. Frank began his legal career as an associate attorney with Squire Patton Boggs. Frank holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in English and an MBA in finance from Seton Hall University and his JD from Case Western Reserve University of Law in Cleveland, Ohio, of course, where he also served as editor-in-chief of the Law Review. Frank is a member of the Bar of the State of Ohio and Society for Corporate Governance. Frank and his wife are fellow Shaker Heights residents as well, and they live in Shaker Heights. So please give a round of applause to Frank and welcome him as a speaker. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, sorry, I might have turned it off.
Folks, just one last thing. After you log in, please just close your laptops until we need them. Thank you.
So hopefully this is working. Is this loud enough? Can you hear me? Okay. All right.
So we've been talking today a lot about ethics, and I heard something come up a couple of times that I don't necessarily agree with, which is that businesses are only focused on the bottom line, so they're not that concerned about ethics. I'm going to try and prove that that's not true. I think I'll get there. I think we'll get there. So I'm going to do a quick introduction. Then I'm going to talk about ethics and integrity as a business asset with a case study that I'm pretty sure predates everybody in this room. And I'm going to cry about that one when I get home. And then a framework for making decisions with integrity. And then at the end, we're going to do a little exercise, which is based off the case study. And I'll ask all the teams to go take this set of facts and tell me what you would do with them. So the first thing is ethics and integrity is easy, right? You've all had role models. You've had teachers, parents, mentors, professors, right? You know right from wrong. You don't need me to tell you that when Dennis Kozlowski used shareholder money to buy $15,000 shower curtains for his house, that was probably wrong. Incidentally, my shower curtain costs $4.99 and it works just fine. So I don't know if his granted wishes or something, but $15,000 is a little ridiculous. Ethics is not easy. That's why we're doing a whole boot camp today, right? So when you look out at corporations, you're going to find statements like these all over their websites. I just picked 3 from the local area, public companies, Eaton Progressive, and my company, Omnova. If you went and looked at every other corporation out there, you're going to find very similar statements. Now, a cynic would say, well, these are public companies, and public companies are required to do these by the stock exchanges. They have to have these codes of ethics out there. But private companies have them. This university has them. Nonprofits have them. If ethics is so easy, why will companies and corporations not shut up about their ethics? Why are they constantly trying to tell you, we are ethical people? These value statements are everywhere. In practically every survey of executive leadership in the last 10 years, when they are saying, what do we want out of our leaders? Integrity is at or near the top of the list. Warren Buffett has a great quote on this. He says, I want my leaders to have 3 things: integrity, intelligence, and energy. And if they don't have the first one, I don't want them to have the second 2 either. Why? Because I don't want my bad people to be smart and energetic. I want them to be dumb and lazy, right? Everybody says they want integrity among their people. So if ethics and integrity are easy, why are we searching so hard for it? So let's break this apart. let's talk about why ethics is not easy, and then we'll talk about why corporations are looking for it. The first one is human capacity for rationalization. We are all the heroes of our own story, right? Think about a time where you've had a bad outcome from a decision that you made. When you were making that decision, you're saying, oh man, really going to screw this person. This is great. Let's do this. No, of course not. You're thinking, well, this is the best that I can do. I'm limited by my circumstances. This person was mean to me, so I'll be mean to them. We have an incredible capacity for rationalization. When Bernie Madoff was making decisions that ultimately cost people billions of dollars, the first time he made that decision, do you think he was thinking about all the implications 20 years down the line? No, of course not. He had a bad quarter. He didn't deliver numbers for his clients one quarter. Next quarter, well, you know what? I'll take in some new investors. I'll give that money to the old investors who just got hit. And I'm a smart guy. I'll make the money back for everybody. And all of this will go away. Well, you know, you repeat that a few 100 million times, and the guy winds up in jail for 120 years. Differences in culture, experience, and education. I'm an Italian, Roman Catholic, capitalist from New Jersey. If I'm at a negotiating table with a Chinese, Buddhist, socialist from Shanghai, we can probably all agree that murder is bad, right? I think the two of us are not going to think murder is a good outcome. But we may have a totally different concept of how we should get to a business deal, right? I may want to share more information. She may not want to share more information. Why? Different upbringings, different backgrounds, different experiences. Here's the real kicker. In business, not every decision is a moral dilemma, right? We don't go into our corporate worlds and sit down in a conference room and say, are we going to sell this product that's going to injure a bunch of people, or are we not going to sell this product? We're going to injure people. Let's do that. That's not the way that decisions get made. The way that decisions get made are, well, we have to install this piece of equipment in our facility. And this piece of equipment is going to filter out some chemicals. We can go with the one that is $5 million more expensive, right? And it'll filter out 100% of the chemicals. Or we'll go with the one that's $5 million less expensive, and it filters out 99.5% of the chemicals. Well, 99.5% sounds pretty good, right? So we'll save that $5 million. We'll make that decision. Nobody asks the questions about what does that 0.5% really mean to the people who are living down the river from that facility, right? So not every choice is a major moral dilemma. It's not black and white. You're not often faced in a corporation with the decision to kill people or not kill people. We can all make that choice, right? It's not about rule sets. If it was about rules, we wouldn't be talking about ethics today. We'd be talking about compliance. This would be a very simple class. So why are ethics and integrity so important to businesses? You're all business students. Who are the stakeholders of a corporation? Shout them out. Who cares? Who's invested in what a corporation does? Shareholders, good. Employees, good. Customers, great. Community, great. Competitors, sure, yeah. Anybody else?
The government.
The government, absolutely. Creditors, that's a really good one. I didn't think that was going to come up. Good. This is a list of 10. I can assure you that there are 20 more on top of this. All of these people have a stake in your companies being ethical. Why? Owners and shareholders. They want to invest in ethical companies. They don't want to be paying for your mishaps in the future. Company directors, they have to oversee the corporation, right? They want to know that what is being produced is ethical, that the people who are making decisions are ethical. Employees. Your generation is probably certainly better than my generation and better than the generations before that, in wanting to work for companies that align with your value sets, right? But actually, when you peel the layer back, what you guys care about more than that is transparency. You want to know that when a corporation says they believe in something, that they actually live up to it. It's hypocrisy that we can't stand. Apple versus Google, right? Google, we know privacy is not really their thing. They make a great product, but privacy is not really their thing, right? Apple makes a huge deal out of privacy. If you found out that Apple was selling your information to Google, you'd have a real problem because Apple told you that they care about your privacy. Customers, suppliers, governments. Oh, that's a good one. George works for the Federal Reserve. They regulate banks. Do you think they want to pay more attention to companies that are unethical, to banks that are unethical? Of course they do. Of course they do. Here's the thing. Lacking ethics and integrity is expensive. You spend money defending claims and lawsuits. You pay settlements and fines. You correct improper practices. But this last one is the one that is really interesting. It's missed opportunities. Your customers and your suppliers don't think your contracts are worth the paper that they're written on if you're not an ethical company, if you have a bad reputation. Talent doesn't want to come to you. Merger and acquisition partners, they don't want to deal with you. Interest rates. Who said creditors early? That was really good. Interest rates. Your lenders will charge you more if they believe you're not going to pay up. They have to charge for risk. They're going to charge you more. So there is business value to being ethical. If you accept that not having integrity is expensive, you also have to agree that there is value in having ethics. A reputation for integrity and ethics is a valuable but very fragile business asset. It is really, really hard to build. It is really, really easy to destroy. So I want to walk through the example that predates all of you by like 15 years, which is Tylenol. In 1982, Johnson & Johnson, the manufacturer of Tylenol, had a great product. It was responsible for 20% of Johnson & Johnson's profitability in the first 3 quarters of 1982, 13% of its year-over-year sales growth, and 33% of its year-over-year profit growth. This is an incredible number. 37% market share in the over-the-counter painkiller market. The next 4 competitors combined didn't have that number. This is a huge, earth-shattering product for Johnson & Johnson. There were over 100 million users in the United States alone. This was by far the most popular product in the world, over-the-counter medicine. More broadly in 1982, just taking a step back since I may have been the only one there, tamper-proof packaging was uncommon and not legally required. You could walk into a store, pop open a box, open the cap, there was no cotton, there was no foil packaging, there were none of those little labels that show different colors when they break. Over-the-counter medications were distributed in 2 types of products. Tablets, which are the really hard, nasty tasting, just pure medicine if you've ever had like aspirin. That's a tablet. And capsules, which are these guys here. Gelatin coated. They have the medicine inside, but really easy to break apart, really easy to get into. And then the other interesting fact is that the 24-hour news cycle did not exist. So if you had a problem until the 6 o'clock news came on. If you were trying to tell a story, you had to wait until the 6 o'clock news came on. You couldn't control the news cycle the way that you can today. So September 29th, 1982, a little girl wakes up. She has a fever, she has a cough, and her parents, thinking they're doing the right thing, give her 1 extra strength Tylenol. Swallows it, they send her up to the bathroom to go get ready for school. 15 minutes later, they walk up there, she's dead on the floor. Over the next few days, 6 other individuals in the Chicago area, largely the same circumstances. Headaches, took a Tylenol, died. By the first days of October, the testing concluded that the deaths were caused by potassium cyanide poisoning. Potassium cyanide poisoning is an awful, awful, awful way to go. The common link on all of those was the use of Tylenol. The Chicago police ruled out a manufacturing problem. They linked the deaths to tampering of product at grocery and drug stores in the area, and the way that they got there was this was happening all across the Chicago area, and it was sporadic bottles at a time. So they took that and said, well, these can't be coming out of the same manufacturing lots. This has to be somebody going around and actively doing this. So the police, number one, ruled out a manufacturing problem, and number two, they quickly localized the threat to the Chicago area. What's interesting is what Johnson & Johnson did. First, Johnson & Johnson didn't learn of this until a Chicago reporter contacted them after the first death. But almost immediately after knowing that, they had a sense that it was only localized to the Chicago area. And they had a sense that it wasn't really a manufacturing problem because of the way that this was rolling out. But what did they do? Without all the facts being established, they alerted consumers across the country not to consume any Tylenol product until the extent of the tampering could be determined. They shut down all production and marketing of Tylenol products, and they ordered a withdrawal of all Tylenol from store shelves in Chicago. Think about this. Think back to what we talked about how profitable and important this product was to Johnson & Johnson. They could have made the decision that we're not going to send out a nationwide broadcast. This is clearly a Chicago thing. We're going to localize it to Chicago. We'll get the message out there. No, they went nationwide. They basically instituted a panic themselves over Tylenol because they did not want people to ingest this stuff if there was even the minor risk that they could be affected. After there were 2 additional deaths in the Chicago area, they ordered the nationwide withdrawal of all Tylenol products from store shelves. And then they actively engaged with the media using that abbreviated news cycle, but also through paid advertising. They actually went out to the national broadcasters and said, we're going to buy some time so we can go out and get our message out that Tylenol needs to be looked at and shouldn't be used. So here's the aftermath. Tylenol capsule sales didn't resume for 6 months. Johnson & Johnson worked with the FDA to come up with packaging, the foil packaging and the cotton and the tamper-proof packaging that we talked about. They developed the caplet, which was harder to mess with. So basically, it was a tablet that was wrapped in gelatin, really hard to inject anything in there. That's what they found out the person was doing. They were taking a needle, they were going into the capsules, and they were injecting cyanide in there. The all-in cost, not profit hit, the cost of all of these efforts was $100 million. $100 million. That's an astronomical amount of money today. In 1982, that was most of the Fortune 500. That was a huge amount of money. 1983, Congress made it a federal crime to tamper with consumer products, and in 89, finally, the FDA established guidelines to make tamper-proof medication. Killer was never found. So here's the question to you. Johnson & Johnson spent $100 million. Their cost was $100 million. If you look at this from a purely transactional standpoint, what did Johnson & Johnson buy with that $100 million? Go ahead, shout it out. Public trust. Consumer confidence. Good. Brand loyalty.
Like lives, perhaps?
Absolutely. The chairman of Johnson & Johnson, when he first heard about this, gathered his top 7 executives in the room. And he said, we care about 2 things. First, we care about people. We need to make sure that people are protected. Number 2, we need to preserve this business to the best of our ability, because if we drop the ball, if we act in some bad way, if we act unethically, this business is gone. We'll lose that public trust. Nobody will buy a Tylenol product ever again. And when Tylenol is 30% of your profits, your company is pretty much done. When they came back on the market 6 months later, their market share was 8%. Remember, it was 37% prior to this incident. It was 8%. By the next year, they were up over 40%. They built a long-term reputation and a brand as an ethical company. What does that get you? Consider 2010. So Johnson & Johnson in 2010 was having some ethical issues internally. They had, rather than this great campaign that they did in 1982, they had what they called shadow withdrawals. They had a number of manufacturing problems across a number of their brands. And rather than going out to the public and letting them know that there was this issue the way that they had in the past, they would go to the individual stores and have the product shipped back to them. They call them shadow recalls. This is a huge problem. It's a big no-no from an FDA standpoint. It's also just generally a bad way of going. They got hauled into Congress. They got slapped around quite a bit in the 24-hour news cycle. But at the end of the day, Johnson & Johnson's brand reputation held up. Why? Because number one, they had this backstop of their credo, their code of ethics that they've actually lived up to demonstrably in the marketplace. But number two is, after they got called out, and this is not the best way to approach this, but after they got called out, then they started to do the actions that everybody expected of Johnson & Johnson. They shut down their manufacturing facility. They actually recalled product. They went back to the things that really made them the company that they were. And there was a consumer survey that year, at the end of the year, that effectively showed that Johnson & Johnson lost almost nothing, even though they had a momentary blip in the way that they were thinking about the world. People looked at it and said, you know what, even the best companies make mistakes. That's the way they looked at it. BP in 2010 had Deepwater Horizon. Nobody was going to accuse BP of having a great public reputation for ethics and integrity and caring about people. They had facilities that had exploded, and they had treated that situation terribly. They had had oil spills and the like. Deepwater Horizon was a travesty of Tylenol-level proportions to BP. They didn't handle it well at all. They were also hauled into Congress. Eventually, they wound up putting together a $30 billion fund to support the communities, but they never got the pass that Johnson & Johnson did. And they got the right to continue operating. Now, before we move on, I want to make a really important distinction here, because what I've done is a little bit dangerous in trying to say that ethics all comes down to dollars and cents. I don't want you to get the impression that my belief is that Johnson & Johnson put all the things down on a ledger and made the right decision because they knew that at the end of the day, they'd have this long-term reputation, or that Tylenol would come back. Frankly, I don't think you make a $100 million bet like that, right? But I'm probably going to work for all of you someday, or I'm going to be defending you someday as your attorney. And while I hope that you'll all make decisions for the right reasons, if you make decisions on the basis of money, I'm okay with that, as long as the decision is ultimately ethical, right? So I'm taking a utilitarian view here. I want you to make the right decisions. There have been a lot of great reasons said today about why you should make the right decision. We don't always talk about the dollar aspects of what ethical decision making is worth, but it actually has value. So one of the things that I do with some of our new associates that join us at Omnova is I usually give an integrity talk, fairly similar to what we just did. And I give them a framework, right? Because like I said earlier, ethics is not a set of rules. You can't look at it black and white. You can't look at a decision and say, well, yes, no, and get to an ethical output. A lot of times you have to ask questions. Almost always you have to ask questions. So here are the questions that I suggest that people ask. Have I considered the perspectives of everyone who's going to be affected by this decision? How are they going to think about it? How is this going to impact them? Have I considered all of the alternatives? Have we really stretched our minds to consider opposite or different ways to deal with this? If there's no harm-free alternative, if there's no way for me to get out of this problem without somebody experiencing harm, who's going to be helped? Who's going to be harmed? Have I tried to minimize the harm that's going to be done? Will the harm fall on a person or an entity that can manage it or can survive it, right? It's not just about minimizing the harm, but if we have to inflict harm, is it somebody who can bear it? Which outcomes are consistent with my values and my duties? If this decision becomes a precedent, am I comfortable with people following this decision as a general rule in the future? Will this seem as reasonable over the long term as it does to me right now? And then this is I call this the mom rule. If the decision was reported on page 1 of the New York Times, would my parents, teachers, or role models, what would they think about that decision? Would I be proud of that decision appearing on page 1 of the New York Times? So what I want to do is give you guys about 10 minutes. I'm going to walk through a fact pattern. This is what's getting posted to your website. So you'll be able to have these facts while you're having discussions at the table. So I'm going to give you a bit of a variation on the Johnson & Johnson dilemma. And what I'd like you to do is discuss amongst yourselves how you would approach it based on the facts that I've given you. And while I'm interested in hearing what the ultimate decision is and what you want to do, what I'm more interested in are what are the factors that you considered? What are the things that you put on the table for discussion while you were thinking through what the right answer was for you? So this is you. Your company manufactures and sells a specialty chemicals product, ARC-124. You're the general manager of the division that developed and sells ARC-124. It's the most profitable in your company, and you have 4,500 employees in your division worldwide. And due to your successes, you are widely considered the heir apparent to the CEO. So ARC-124, it's a liquid additive. It's used in the manufacturing of specialty paints. Customers mix ARC-124 with other paint ingredients. It provides next-level water resistance. It's a really great ingredient that customers want to mix into their products. It's liquid gold. It's 70% of your division's profitability and 35% of the company's profitability. It is the most profitable and highest selling product at your company. There are no significant competitors, and the raw materials that are used to make ARC-124 are rare and really difficult to source. So here's the problem. A company scientist has come up to you and presented an article that says there may be a link between a raw material in ARC-124, IPM, to lung cancer. IPM in its natural state is a fine dry powder. There have been some prior studies of IPM and its potential links to lung cancer. All of those studies have been inconclusive. They haven't been negative, they've been inconclusive. The article's allegation and the prior studies relate only to IPM in its pure, unadulterated powder form. There have been no prior studies of potential links to lung cancer when IPM is actually mixed into a product. To the company's knowledge, your company's knowledge, there have been no lawsuits, complaints, or allegations that products containing ARC-124 have contributed to cancer. So as far as you know, the product is safe. During the 10 years in which ARC-124 has been produced by the company, 300 of your employees have been exposed to pure IPM, the pure powder IPM. Only one employee over that time who handled IPM, who is a known long-term smoker, has been on long-term disability leave for a lung cancer diagnosis. There is no known substitute for IPM, and there's only one supplier worldwide. I've just given you a very complex set of facts. This is exactly what happens in the business world. Go. All right, it sounds like we've had a lot of great discussions. Let's bring it back together. All right, who wants to be my leadoff hitter? Who wants to tell me how you've solved the dilemma we have here? Any volunteers?
Mike for Mike.
There you go.
So we said that the company should invest money into doing studies on the chemical. They need to be transparent with the public and let them know that currently they don't see any issues with it, but it's a concern that has been brought up. So they are investing in research to see if there's an issue with it.
Good approach. Anybody else have a different thought? Okay. Getting my workout in. Sorry, I just got 10,000 steps, so we're good. Go ahead.
We mostly focused on the employees because they're the ones who are directly impacted by this chemical. And so we said we would issue like a notice to all the employees first and then make sure they get tested for it because we as a company want to make sure they're safe. And if we focus on our employees, then that'll also be like a good word out to everyone. And if they do have this, if they do have lung cancer, to help them with treatment, no matter like whether or not they are a smoker, just because it could be because of us, and we don't want that to create lawsuits or anything. So our first priority was working with the direct people impacted.
That's great. Any other thoughts? There you go.
So we focus more on our manufacturing side of it. If you take, all these precautions, maybe like hazmat suits or anything to further precautions, so if the later research is conclusive that there are effects, that we do take the precautions to at least minimize the cause.
That's great. All right, maybe one more. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Cool.
I guess maybe like investigate who funded the study or the sample size and how statistically like relevant their findings were.
Right.
That would be another step.
So you're all going to hate me, but there's no right answer to this. There is no answer to this. If you try and make a panic and take the product off the market without all the information, which you don't have all the information, I intentionally didn't give it to you, you're potentially threatening the lives and the well-being of your 4,500 employees without full data about whether this product is actually even harmful, right? The one guy who has cancer was also a smoker. You don't know whether this IPM product actually did anything to him. On the other hand, if you don't say anything out into the market, you've now created a gigantic risk that if this thing becomes a cancer agent or is confirmed as a cancer agent in the future, that you've put this product out there and you've known all along that there was a potential for cancerous results. The reality is, when you go out into the business world, there are no black and white answers, period. The problems are not black and white, so the answers can't be black and white. You're going to make the best decisions that you can with the information that you have at hand. What I would challenge you to do when you're trying to make ethical decisions is to make sure you've thought through all of the consequences that you can, all of the alternatives that you can. Try and be thoughtful about the decisions that you're making, right? It's very easy to be quick. Everybody wants to be quick. Everybody wants it 80% right and 100% fast, right? Slow it down, think through the consequences, encourage your coworkers to do the same. And while you may not ultimately have every answer or even the right answer, nobody's going to charge you with not being an ethical thinker. All right? Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Can we give another round of applause to Frank Esposito from Nova for his great presentation. Very informative, interesting case that, of course, most of you did not know about until today. So I am going to, in a minute, I'm going to give you a short break before we move on to Dr. Giacaloni's presentation and talk, and then the assessment. But first, I know some of our facilitators have to leave early or have to leave now, and that I want to thank them for devoting their day to this and being a part of this event, sitting at the table, talking to you. Many of these people, they offer their service to us endlessly, and so I'm very appreciative of everyone who's here today. Dr. Nathan Gellert, thank you very much. Dr. Stacy Astrove, who is facilitator and speaker. Dr. Allie Dockner. Dr. Kyle Odell, thank you. I think everyone knows Kyle. Dr. Jackie Schmidt is over there. And Dr. Rick Grency over here at this table. Dr. Brian Saxton, always here to help. Dr. Sebastian Brockhouse, also here. Mr. Tom Bonda is here. Tom, oh, he's back in there. Okay, Tom Bonda. Dr. Scott Moore. Mr. Mike Quinn from Omnova, also here to help. And did I miss anyone? If I did, it was an accident. Do I have a full list? Okay. All right, thank you all. And we're going to take just a short 5-minute break while we get set up for the ethics mindset and then the assessment, which again will be used to make sure that everyone has completed this process and that you can get your certificate, put it on your resume, talk about it in your job interviews and all of that good stuff. Thank you.
Let me just ask for another round of applause for our speakers before they go out the door. They did a wonderful job. What we're going to do now is a few different things. I'm going to try to tie up what we've talked about today into a small, very basic model for you to take away with you. When we're done with that, we will also do an assessment, which will be on Canvas and will get activated to make sure that you got something out of this. And there will also be an evaluation of the program so that we can get some input from you in terms of how useful this was to you and any feedback you might be able to give us, okay? So, what time is it?
2:15.
Okay. It only feels like 3 o'clock, right? If you can't tell by the accent, I'm originally from New York. Don't hold it against me. I'm from a crummy place called Flushing. It sounds like a toilet bowl process and looked like it too. And one of the nice things about Flushing is that we're very blunt. So let me be blunt. We're getting to the end of the day. And I know some of you are tired, and I certainly appreciate all the effort and time you've put into this, and I hope you've gotten something out of this. So what I'd like to do now is make a promise to you that hopefully will motivate you. I want to get you out of here as quickly as I can, and you can help me. Amen to that. Okay, there we go. You see, we people from Flushing tell the truth. Okay, now listen, folks. I'm going to take you through a process here, and I'm going to need your input. So if you stay quiet, we stay longer, right? So engage, get active, get part of this, and we move quicker, okay? The idea here is to get the material done and to get the assessment done, get the evaluation done. It's not to keep you here a minute more than you need to be, okay? Yes? Yep. There we go. All right. So what we're doing is I want to talk about making the ethical mindset simpler. Really what it comes down to is this. You got a lot of great information this morning. You got a lot of really interesting things. You had a lot of examples. What I'm going to leave you with today is a way that you can walk out of here with something in your head. A way of making decisions more simply. That doesn't mean they're going to be easy to make. It means that I'm going to give you a model to work from that hopefully is simple enough that you will remember it, okay? Back in 1980, a woman named Laurie Nash published a very famous article called Ethics Without the Sermon. And Laurie Nash was a Harvard Business School professor. And what she did was she gave one of the most practical approaches to making ethical decisions. Her approach uses 12 questions that you can use in making an ethical decision. And the reason why, and I rarely talk about anything back in 1980, trust me, those of you my students know what I'm talking about. Brian's there smiling. But this is a classic. This is a classic. When I go and I train executives, this is what I use. And I use it because it's straightforward, it's easy to remember, and I'm making it even easier. The way I'm going to do that is I've distilled the 12 questions to help you decide how you can toil, hard work, toward making the right ethical decisions, okay? This is a simple model to follow. I'm going to give you some questions, and we're going to use a real example of something that actually happened in an organization that I know of. So, what kinds of questions do we have when we want to make ethical decisions? How do you toil toward them? Well, there are questions about thinking. How do you think about the problem? There are questions about outcomes. What kinds of outcomes are you trying to bring about? There are questions about ideals. What ideals are you trying to achieve? And there are questions about light. Can you shed light on what's actually going on, and can you do it comfortably? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some of the questions for each of these. But remember the acronym TOIL. It'll help you to remember the kinds of things that you want to do when you're making an ethical decision. Thinking. The first question about thinking is really, do you understand the issue involved? Have you defined the ethical problem accurately? What's the primary ethical concern? Is there something in the event or the decision that would lead onlookers to raise questions about the moral appropriateness of a decision or choice? Folks, sometimes you know, you've all been there, where you see something and you go, there's something disgusting about that. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but there's something disgusting about that. And if you remember nothing about today, I want you to remember this. The minute you start feeling that way, the minute you ask yourself the question, why am I uncomfortable about this? What is it about this that's just not quite right? I want you to stop in your tracks. There is no better sign than understanding that. And a lot of people simply push through it and think, it'll be okay. Is there some principle or value that's being violated? Is it that we're violating fairness? Is it that we're lying? Is it that we're engaging in abuse of another human being? What is it that makes us so uncomfortable? Listen to your gut. You're smarter than you think you are when it comes to this stuff. Many of us walk around and we've got this sick feeling about the things we see being done. Listen to your gut. It's the best thing you can possibly do. Because when you do that, you're listening to a deeper part of yourself. And we tend to discard those things. So I want to give you a case. All right? This actually happened. This is true. I know the person who it happened to. Nothing made up here. Anna Zirkel began work for Spencer Office Supplies 2 years ago in a management position. The owner of the company explained to Anna that when a client ordered 100,000 envelopes, a Spencer salesman would respond by sending the client 70,000 envelopes. The remainder would go to the company's warehouse. Upon receiving the envelopes, most customers would not count them and wouldn't notice the shortage. But if they did, the salesman would explain that the print shop had been so busy that he rushed the first 70,000 and the rest would be sent later. And if they caught it, they'd actually send them. As an incentive for the salesperson to partake in this practice, the profit of cheating people of 30,000 envelopes was split between the salesperson and the company. You might say, what will they do with the 30,000 envelopes? They left them in the warehouse, so when the next order of 100,000 went through, they'd send those with the 100,000 and wouldn't have to make more envelopes. They would just basically cash in on having cheated them once before. So Anna wondered, should I go along with this practice? Here, folks, is a simple ethical issue. You're working for a company, and the company says to you, look, we're cheating our customers. We're cheating them. And if you help us, we'll give you a cut. So what's the ethical issue? Plain and simple. What is it? Remember, help me. Help me, help you. Jerry Maguire. Here we go.
Do you go along with what the company wants, or do you go along with the business morals or your personal moral?
Right. Do you go along with what the company wants, or do you do what you know to be the right thing? What do you do? Because you know darn well what's going to happen, don't you? If you say no, what's going to happen? You're going to get fired. You know that. You absolutely know it. So calling the right issue becomes important. You got to understand, what is it? What's the problem here? So that's the primary ethical issue that she faces, right? Are there other issues in here? Yeah, we won't have time to do those today. But that's the primary one. Are you going to run into that? Are you going to run into that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I was 20 years old, I got fired from a job because they wanted me to falsify data. I was working for New York State in a drug enforcement group. And the governor decided he didn't like the data, so he told me to make it up. So I told him to go to hell. I was 20 and a bit of a jerk. But anyway, and 2 weeks later, the governor told my boss that unfortunately, there was a budget cut. And it was my job that was cut. It was pretty clear. I knew exactly what was going on. And so would you. My job, by the way, is not just to tell you to think about the right thing. My job is also to tell you that the right thing sometimes has consequences. I may have just given you advice that's going to get you fired. And you need to understand that. Folks, ethics isn't costless. If you stand by your ideals, there may be a price for it, and there often is. But if you understand the issue, you've at least got a chance at deciding whether or not you want to incur that cost. Ideals. Remember the second part. What's your intention in making a decision? Are there regulations or rules or policies that you're trying to live by? Are there religious or secular principles that you want to live by? What's the ideal you're trying to achieve? What's the core of you and the core of your company? The core of who you are and the core of what your company is. And you want to live that. Complex question. So, do you think that there are regulations, rules, or policies Anna should be trying to live by? Anybody? Or do you think that there are principles she should be living by? Anybody? Yeah. What?
Principles.
Yeah, what kind of principles?
In regards to the situation?
Yeah.
I mean, just honesty. Like, she should be honest about what she's doing.
Okay. Honesty? Anybody? Yeah. Yeah, have respect for the people, right? Don't cheat them. Well, don't play them for fools. Yeah.
Like most people know that cheating is bad, so I feel like just to follow the basic rules of ethics. Murder is not cheating, is bad.
Yeah, Alec, exactly. Basic principles, right? Basic principles that we all live by. It's pretty clear that there are some principles that are extant here. They're playing right in front of her, and the question is, does she understand that? Outcomes, the third part. What will your decision produce? This was an important one. Could your decision hurt or impact an innocent person negatively? Could it hurt that person physically? Could it hurt that person psychologically? Could it hurt that person financially? Folks, we do things every day. We make decisions every day that impact other people. And we don't think about it. Most of us are so busy running around trying to live our own lives, we're not thinking about the fact that we do things that impact people in profound ways. We say things to people. We treat people in particular ways that have an impact on their lives. it hurts them. Could Anna make a decision that hurts or negatively impacts innocent people? Can she? What is it? What's the negative thing she can do?
Not say anything.
What?
Not say anything.
Not say anything. What would that do?
That would hurt the companies that are using her company to buy off of.
Exactly. So she says nothing. She hurts the people who are her clients, people who trusted her. And finally, light. And this is the one that I think is really easiest to talk about, and Frank alluded to it before. Are you comfortable with transparency and openness? Could you disclose without qualm your decision or action to your boss, the head of your organization, your colleagues, your family, the person you most admire, or to society as a whole? In other words, can you be transparent about what you did? A lot of people make decisions and they make them like this. They're hushed. They'll say things like, don't tell anybody. Well, that's a bad sign. We shouldn't make this public. Let's keep this between you and me. That is a sign that you've got something to hide. It doesn't pass the sniff test. There's something wrong. If you can't tell people, there's something wrong. And you should feel immediately that you're going down the wrong path. Immediately. So how comfortable would Anna be telling others about what she decided to do?
I think one route that maybe is possible is to go to a regulatory agency rather than to go to customers. I don't know.
Right? She may want to go outside, right?
Yeah.
That might be one way of going at it. What could she do that she'd be comfortable with? What could she do? Yeah. Where?
She could maybe seek advice from like family or friends.
She could seek advice from other people. What else could she do that she'd be comfortable with? Say that loud.
Talk to her boss and say, I'm not comfortable doing this, and this isn't the right thing to do.
Exactly. That's the first step. I'm not comfortable doing this. Right? What might happen?
She'll get fired.
She may get fired. Or her boss may look around and go, uh-oh, there's someone here who's not willing to play this game, and now it's out. And maybe we need to stop. Right? Being able to stand up for the right thing becomes very important. Being able to do things that other people can look at and go, I can understand that. But nobody in here, or I hope nobody in here, is going to sit there and think, oh, yeah, cheap people have 30,000 envelopes. There's no problem with that. Nobody would want to go to a party and say, hey, you know what? I just ripped off somebody. Right? How many people would be proud of that? If you are, don't raise your hand. Most people would say there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with that. And that's where I want you to be headed. That's how I want you to be thinking. Do I feel comfortable with this? So, what's the bottom line to an ethical mindset? Good questions. Number one, ask good questions. Ask yourself, what is it that's problematic to me here? Good ideals. Stand for some principle. Stand for something. It's going to piss people off. They're going to get angry. Who cares? It doesn't make any difference. If you're doing the right thing and you really believe in it, then you've got to stand up for it. Good outcome targets. Look at what you're about to do and ask yourself the question, who's going to get hurt here? Who's going to be helped? What can I do about this? And finally, transparency. A guilty conscience hides things. A guilty conscience says, don't tell anyone. People who are doing bad things talk in hushed tones. Bless you. People who are afraid of getting into trouble don't want people to know. And so we go back to the model. We go back to a model about thinking, about ideals, about creating good outcomes, and about creating transparency. Will this guarantee a good ethical decision? No, absolutely not. The world's too complicated. God, if I could do this and guarantee ethical decision, I'd be out on a speaking tour, right? No, it doesn't. What it does, and this is all you can expect, what it does is it increases the chances that you're going to do the right thing. It increases the chances. It gives you the opportunity to really delve into the possibility of finding an answer, of doing something that you can feel comfortable with. Okay? Questions? No questions? I'm that good? No, it's 2:30. That's what it is. Okay, so here's what I want you to do now. Dr. Moore, you ready? Okay. So I want you to go onto the Canvas site for this, and you will see an assessment in there. Bottom of the page. And you will see an assessment in there. See if I can see it there. It'll say case study assessment. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to work through that case. All right? I'd like you to work through that case. I'd like you to answer the questions in there.